the most radical thing on earth is what the framers put in place, which is this unbelievably transformative ideal. I mean, no one teaches it to us as passionately, amazingly revolutionary anymore, that they decided, you know what, let's move further out into the unknown in a vision of giving ordinary people autonomy, ordinary people the power to make decisions about their lives and their communities. And so there's no kind of glamorization of the democratic project. And the last thing, which is truly bad, is that identity politics did, you know, it's a legitimate critique. The framers weren't superheroes, and they weren't prophets, and they didn't have, you know, a vision that transcended their century and their time. So yeah, they blew it. They left out, you know, they left out people of color, they left out women, they left out people who didn't have a threshold of a certain amount of property. But that was so much further than anyone had ever gone before that. And what is miraculous to me is that other groups have demanded the expansion of democracy without having to fundamentally transform what the founders set in motion. So we really need to teach young people, and this issue transcends left and right. You know, that's why I'm getting so much support from conservatives as well as liberals who are alarmed about what they see going on to democracy. We need to kind of relearn, you know, the founders' vision, kind of fall in love with it again, because the last thing that happened, which is bad, to your question's point, is that all of us, old and young, left and right, kind of got lazy, and we kind of subcontracted out defending democracy or understanding the Constitution to a professional class. You know, it's like, oh, the accountant will do my taxes, the landscape guy will do the lawn, you know, the politicians will do democracy, or the pundits will talk about democracy, or the constitutional scholars will understand the Constitution. And that is not what the founders intended. That is so an abdication. And it's set in place the danger we're seeing now. It made it possible for people to strip away our freedoms. The founders intended for you and me, not just you are a constitutional scholar, but me, a citizen, a non-lawyer, you know, the person who's teaching my kids, the person who's doing the lawn. The founders intended for us to understand the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, for us to defend it, for us to do freedom, to maintain democracy.
The folks at The Economist Annual Democracy Index have a warning for us that we're in a bad place, and it's getting worse. The Washington Post puts it this way: in 89 countries, democratic norms look worse than they did last year. Just 4.5% of the world's residents live in fully functioning democracies. That's down from 8.9% in just 2015. That precipitous drop is thanks primarily to the United States. In 2016, The Economist demoted the country from a full to flawed democracy, citing a serious decline in public trust in U.S. institutions. In 2017, the United States didn't fare any better. As the report's authors explain, President Trump was able to tap into the disempowerment felt by voters who were frustrated with U.S. political and economic stagnation. The report's authors caution that this polarization foreshadows further democratic deterioration. So, keep your citizenship skills sharpened, especially if you sense that the America portrayed on TV doesn't match the country you are seeing these days.
This is a shameful exercise of power that overturns a set of principles that our nation has observed since General George Washington first enunciated them during our Revolutionary War. They have been observed by every president since then until now.
President George Washington, in the very first inaugural address, warned Americans that they had a new responsibility. He said, "The preservation of the sacred fire of liberty and the destiny of the Republican model of government are justly considered, perhaps as deeply as finally, staked on the experiment entrusted to the hands of the American people." Now, you may not think of yourself or our democracy as an experiment, but look around. All over the world, millions and millions of people still live under tyranny.
And that's why it's in the interest of all Americans, whatever their political views, whatever their party affiliation, to at least understand how dramatically things have been changing just sort of one level beneath the headlines for the last 6 or 7 years, how far the ball has been moved down the field, and how that's going to permanently reshape American democracy, not just today, but 10 years from now, 50 years from now, as whoever is the next president and the president after that and the president after that is able to benefit from this administration's very successfully implemented agenda.
So the courts have removed themselves from many of these separation of powers fights. The result is what the framers never thought would happen. I mean, we have the really extraordinary expansion of presidential power in our country, and neither of the other two branches are actively checking that power. And the result is a new system is emerging, one very different from what the framers intended, and I think one that is less stable. You know, that separation of powers doctrine is the very essence of the Madisonian system. It is what has given us the stability. It's why we've lasted when other systems have not. These are changes that are so fundamental and so important. It's astonishing that we have not had a debate about this.
I'm a citizen of the United States who cares about a republic rather than a monarchy. And I have an interest in having Congress exercise its authority to check the executive, even if Congress does not wish to go forward on that score.
You refer to the Bush administration, President Bush, as a rogue White House. Why is that?
Because they seem to have a contempt for the constitutional checks and balances. And this troubles me. I've been in this government now for over 51 years. I've served with 11 presidents. I've never seen an administration that is grasping for power, so contemptuous of the legislative branch and so contemptuous of the Constitution, and always grasping for more power. I'm concerned about this, and this is why I wrote this book, Losing America. Vote to save your country, I say to my colleagues. Vote to save your country. I wasn't brought here by any commander-in-chief. No commander-in-chief brought me here, and no commander-in-chief's going to send me home. My first and last standard by which I live and by which I hope to die is this Constitution of the United States. It says I have a right, and the men and women of this chamber have a duty to speak the people's will.
You're a citizen, right? You're a citizen politician, and we need more of those. People look at ordinary politicians, most of them, and they say, look, you know, we heard it all before. You treat us like Charlie Brown, and you're Lucy. Every time you talk about reform, just as you get in office, you pull the ball up, and we fall flat on our back. And, you know, my friend, the man I campaigned hard for in the last election, Barack Obama, is the biggest example of this. This man came in, the only reason to support him... So much energy. Yeah, and the only reason to support him over Hillary Clinton was that he promised to change the system. Hillary Clinton was like, look, it's not my job to fix the horse. I'm going to get on the horse and run as far as I can. But he said, if we don't take up the fight to change the way Washington works, then there will be no solving these problems for our children. And did he take up the fight? He did not.
And the debate over whether American democracy is for sale. In a 5-4 decision, the Supreme Court eliminated limits on how much money individuals can donate in any 2-year election cycle. A separate limit on how much can be donated to a single candidate remains in place.
Can you give us a question? Go ahead. No, Mr. President-elect. Go ahead. President-elect, go ahead. Since you are attacking our news organization, not you. Can you give us a chance? Your organization is terrible. You are attacking our news organization. Your organization is terrible. Give us a chance to ask a question, sir. Go ahead. Sir. Quiet. Quiet. Mr. President-elect. Go ahead. She's asking a question. Don't be rude. Can you give us a question? Don't be rude. Can you give us a question? Don't be rude. No, I'm not going to give you a question. I'm not going to give you a question. Can you stay categorical? You are fake news. Sir. Go ahead.
Americans earning less than $75,000 would face substantial tax increases, and this is exactly the opposite of what the president promised when he was campaigning.
We will massively cut taxes for the middle class, the forgotten people. The forgotten men and women of this country who built our country. We will massively lower taxes. It's in our plan. We will save and protect Social Security and Medicare. Hillary is going to cut your Social Security and cut your Medicare benefits. We will massively cut taxes for the middle class.
Tax relief will be concentrated on the working and middle class taxpayer. They will receive the biggest benefit, and it won't even be close.
In fact, this tax bill is the single biggest transfer of wealth to the richest Americans in the history of American government.
So what would it actually look like if we had a real president, not someone who's running the Trump Organization and seems to moonlight as President of the United States? Here's what a real president would do. First of all, he'd give a speech to the country explaining the problem to people in a language and way that would be both compelling and illuminating for people so they understand the nature of the threat.
Truth. If we as a nation do not get our act together, this great nation is going to slip into an oligarchic form of society where a handful of billionaires control our political and economic life. Let me tell you how absurd it is. Just announced the other day, the Koch brothers, second wealthiest family in America. A family worth tens of billions of dollars, extremely right-wing, are contributing over $40 million to try to make the United States Senate stay Republican. $40 million. And here is what is even crazier. A guy named Sheldon Adelson, also one of the wealthiest people in America. This is a billionaire who is prepared to contribute huge sums of money to another billionaire named Donald Trump. The American people are sick and tired of billionaires running our economy and our political life.
Why are we sitting here every day reading about Russian intervention in our election? How Putin is basically using lies to divide us and poison our democracy. Why are we not selling the truth about him, all the money he's stolen, all the people he's basically made disappear from Russian politics? Why are we not using the truth to undermine his autocracy while he is using lies and poison to undermine our democracy?
Well, how about the Russians giving money to the Republican side? It's unbelievable. That's where Newt Gingrich is right. It's sleazy. Russians.
Nobody's going to defend that
They
practice.
used to be the enemy, remember? Now they're bankrolling the party. We'll be right back.
Defended.
I want to make sure you are not.
And that brings us to this. At the same moment, the U.S. Senate was releasing this report today, affirming and doubling down on the intelligence community's conclusions about Russia interfering in our last election in an unprecedented way. At that same moment, look, all these Republican senators were in Russia today, talking to the Russian government about how excited they are to let bygones be bygones, so we can all start working together again, since we're all such good friends and we're all pulling in the same direction anyway.
And you know, everybody in this country is fed up with the United States Congress that seems to stumble over itself with its inability to do anything correctly or that they want. Here are the Republicans. Look at it, absolutely vacant. Absolutely vacant over there. And I think that is a symbol of a vacancy of morality, of a vacancy of commitment, if you will, a vacuum. And I think people have had it right up to here. So, Mr. Chairman, I think this is a remarkable statement, what we're seeing here. A remarkable statement. It represents a lack of spine and a lack of moral gumption and a lack of a sense of responsibility. And I don't want to be party to that in this United States Congress, and I refuse to be associated with that kind of spinelessness. And I hope that the Republicans will get off the dime and recognize what's at stake here. Because what's at stake here is the kind of country that we are, very simply, period.
Not citizens who carry the day, but the growing concentration of wealth beyond any boundary of nation or conscience and its influence over our governing institutions through money. Whatever nice programs we speak of, whatever dreams we share, unless the basic fact of unchecked power and privilege is acknowledged and courageously challenged, nothing will ever change.
If we can break open the level of participation by people by somehow making it easier for people to vote, for heaven's sake. I mean, here we live in a world of high technology. Everything's on an iPad. Everything's done on an iPad except voting, and it still takes you a week to go register at the county commissioner's office. And it's total nonsense. We ought to be taking the ability to participate in our democracy directly to the people.
When this war is over here in the colonies, the new aristocracy will be landowners. Tell me about Ohio.
This is, I think, not what any of us expected to be living through in our lifetime in terms of thinking about the vulnerability of the American political system to our enemies and how American politicians would respond to that with such incredible partisanship.
Have a puppet as president of the United States.
No puppet.
And it's pretty clear.
You're the puppet.
It's pretty clear you puppet. You won't admit
No, you're
that the
the puppet.
Russians have engaged in cyber attacks.
The 2016 American election season was in high gear, and so were Vladimir Putin's cyber troll farms, hackers, and intelligence operatives.
People say to me, why are you so concerned about the Russians? Here's the reason why. I worked at the White House, as you said. To my knowledge, to anybody's knowledge, this is the first time that conspirators of a foreign country have penetrated the White House, gained an ally in the national security advisor to the president, influenced the thinking of the vice president, and made a fool out of the American president. I mean, it's important when Russian conspirators can penetrate the White House that way. You see this coming clearer and clearer in Steve Harper's timeline.
To every citizen watching across our land, this is your time to choose. It's a time to choose whether we turn backward to the failure and frustration of the past, or whether we continue forward into a future of American greatness.
When the government is, they talk about the government shutdown, they're going to be talking about the President of the United States. Who was the president at that time? They're not going to be talking who the head of the House was, the head of the Senate.
We have to close down our government. We're building that wall. So I would have no problem doing a shutdown. It's time we had proper border security. This would be a very good time to do a shutdown. I am proud to shut down the government, but I will do whatever we have to do. If we have to stay out for a very long period of time, we're going to do that.
President Trump announcing he will bypass Congress and divert billions of dollars from military construction projects and counter narcotics for his border wall.
We will have a national emergency, and we will then be sued, and they will sue us in the Ninth Circuit, even though it shouldn't be there, and we will possibly get a bad ruling, and then we'll get another bad ruling, and then we'll end up in the Supreme Court, and hopefully we'll get a fair shake, and
This
we'll win in the
is
Supreme
really
Court.
not a Republican versus Democratic issue. This is not a vote whether you're for or against Donald Trump or even Donald Trump's policies. This really is a matter of upholding your oath of office. This is about protecting the Article I powers, the concept of checks and balances, the Constitution's explicit granting of the power of the purse to the House of Representatives, which is fundamental to congressional power. So I'm hoping that there's more than a handful of Republicans who are going to stand up and say, look, this is about the Constitution. This is about the prerogatives of this institution, the People's House, not just simply blue and red. So I do think this is going to be a defining vote, maybe one of the defining votes of this Congress for Republicans. And this is a red line, and we're going to see whether or not they're willing to stand up for their oath of office and against Donald Trump.
The president's attitude is not going to color whether I honor my oath of office to uphold the Constitution of the United States. I wish he would have the same dedication to that oath of office himself. But we will be fighting him on this usurping of power of violating the Constitution of the United States in the Congress, in the courts, and with the American people. So this is a path I would not recommend he go down.
Congress has the freedom to pass this resolution, and I have the duty to veto it, and I'm very proud to veto it.
The U.S. House of Representatives upheld President Trump's veto of a measure to block his national emergency declaration. In all, 248 lawmakers voted to override, but that was 38 short of the two-thirds majority needed. The emergency declaration along the southern border still faces multiple legal challenges.
Given a legal order from the Commander-in-Chief, we are executing on that order.
Shanahan has informed Congress that he wants to shift as much as $1 billion in his budget to the border wall project.